Hey up and welcome to another episode of Last Cast. Today you join us once again at Sunrise Lakes just outside Harrogate. We're going to do another match scenario today. If you haven't seen a match scenario that we've done before, there's a link in the top corner of the screen and we'll show that's basically 3 episodes from that first set of the series that we did. If you're not familiar with the series, I'll run you through the format and the way we go about doing these match scenarios. Basically, it's a peg at random pretty much. In terms of the peg that we're actually on today, we've sort of chosen a peg because we wanted to try and cover a few different areas of the lake really. So we're on peg 23, but I'll go into more detail about that. In terms of the actual format, the way we do it is we've got 6 hours to try and catch a target weight. The target weight is going to be £50 today because the match weights lately have been quite good. The way that we do it, we basically cut the session down into 3 segments of 2 hours thereabouts. So we have to basically cover 3 methods, or I have to choose 3 methods suited to the peg. So the way that we basically do it, we have a look at the peg and I've got to assess the best way that I think I can sort of choose my methods to try and get that £50 target weight. So we'll get down to the peg in a second and have a quick look at what we're going to fish with and basically try and suss out what I'm going to do for the day. Again, what will be done is cut into sort of 3 segments. This will be the first segment where we'll cover the first method we'll start on, and then part 2 and part 3 obviously will follow on from that, and part 3 will show you the weigh-in to see what we finally end up with. But as I say, we'll get down to the peg now, show you around the area of the lake, explain sort of a bit more about the peg and the depths and things like that, and then I'll have to suss out what I'm going to do throughout the course of the day to try and catch that £50 target weight. So we'll get down there now and see what we've got. Right, so as you can see now, we're down on the peg. This is peg 23, as I say, on the match lake, and it's an area of the lake that we've not fished before. The reason why, as I say, in the previous one we sort of picked the peg at random and we got 27 just round the corner, but we've decided to go to this area of the lake today purely because it's an area of the lake that I've not actually fished, so it gives me more of a realistic representation of actually sort of drawing in a match, an area of the lake that I'm going to have to suss out from scratch. Most of the pegs up that way and a couple over there I already know because I've fished them in the past when we've done, say, whip fishing and paste fishing, various other things like that. So I've come to an area of the lake that I've not fished today. I don't know the depths, I don't really know what sort of dwells down this part of the lake, so as I say, I'm going to have to really suss it out and work hard to try and reach that £50 target. Looking at the peg initially, looking at the lay of the land's the first thing that to assess, especially somewhere like this, and I assume this is probably the deepest area of the lake. Beneath us there's a couple of other lakes, and I say they're down the slope, so this would effectively be almost like a down wall, so I'm expecting this area to be deep. So that's the first thing I've identified. As you can see, it's a lovely feature peg, and we've actually decided to come down here because it brings a bit of running line stuff into the equation, because we've got a couple of points of the islands, so obviously that's a method chuck really. It can't really be anything else. Again, pellet waggler this time of year is not really worth looking at. I think a little method feeder or a little hybrid feeder, something like that, is where I'll probably go. So that'll be the first method I'd tend to start on, obviously starting at the most extreme range of my peg and then trying to draw the fish closer as the day goes on. As I say, I reckon the peg's probably shallower over there than it is towards the near side, so what I'd expect to do as the day goes on is draw the fish nearer to me. I think they'll come closer and I'll be able to hopefully catch under my feet. So a couple of little things to take from that. With it being a deep area of the lake, seeing a couple of fish top as well, I think shallow fishing is important, especially when you've got a depth like this. So I think a few shallow rigs, something like casters, maybe some 4mm pellets into the equation, sort of 6 or 7 metres, something like that, I think will be my second go-to. Again, because it's not very shallow, there's no real point exploring the depths. I think feeding plenty of bait, trying to get some fish up in the water, especially over the mid part of the day where carp and things can go off the feed, it allows me to catch silverfish, hides, chub, whatever really swims. So I think that'll be the second plan of attack. So that'll be in episode 2 where we'll, like I said, that'll fill in the mid part of the match, the second 2-hour stint. And then finally, as I've said, if you look at the edges around here, it's going to be deep. And I think fishing, say, top kit and one something like that, probably with, I reckon, hard pellets, banded, especially if there's a few barbel about. I think that'll be the way that I'll probably finish the session. So that'll be the final bit. And as I say, what I'll do during the session is I'll feed the other lines as well. So it's not a case where we have to start a line from scratch. Say we'll start on the method, I'll loose feed shallow, come onto the shallow line, and then think what I'll do is probably looking at either cad pot or loose feed some 6mm hard pellets somewhere around this area. At the bottom of the near side shelf I think could be a good shout. As I say, that's pretty much the plan of attack for today. So what I'll do now is get a couple of rigs on, start plumbing around, find out what the peg's like, and then we should really be ready to start the session and try and work our way towards that £50 target. Right, so as you can see now we're on the peg. I've got a load of gear set up around me, all my baits prepared, plumbed up and everything's ready to go for the session. So I'll quickly just explain what I've set up. As I explained just before, you've seen this section and sort of the montage of me setting stuff up and all that. I explained like what I was thinking with the peg, and basically I've gone down a very similar kind of route. As I've said, the island chuck, self-explanatory, it's going to be method feeder there. So I've set up a couple of different feeders, a hybrid feeder and a standard method feeder. And I'll run you through that in a second as we sort of go into explain about the first segment that we're going to do. But just a quick sort of overview of what I've set up. So as I say, the method feeder is going to be the first 2 hours. And I've set up 4 shallow rigs that again I'll run through when we come to that in the second part. And that's going to be at sort of 3 sections out, loose feeding casters and 4mm pellets. Hopefully try and catch a few sort of decent fish, few silvers, things like that in the mid part of the day when it can go a bit funny. Then at the end of the session we're going to finish off fishing hard 6mm pellets on a top kit. I found a nice area at the bottom of the shelf, nice and hard bottom there, and hopefully that should hold a few better fish. So as I say, that's the overview of the day. Method feed is going to be the first section of this match scenario. Second part's going to be shallow fishing with casters and 4mm pellets, maybe a bit of worm in that. And then the final segment's going to be fishing hard pellets at the bottom of the near shelf. So like I say, that's pretty much it. So I'll explain sort of what I set up for this first segment, the method feeder. Now it's very easy to sort of go to a peg like this, say you've got an island chuck, set up a standard sort of medium-sized method feeder and go from there. But especially this time of year when the temperature's a bit down, there's been a bit of cold water going in, you need to sort of vary your approach a bit, and especially somewhere like this where there's a lot of variety in what you can catch. It's important that you do consider that, whether we're targeting F1s, proper carp, skimmers, bream, trying to catch whatever. So like I said, I've set up 2 different rods and I'll run you through those now. The first one, as I've said, is sort of a standard method feeder, if you like. I've gone for a small size 24 gram Drennan method feeder. As I say, bog standard. Got it running there because you're not allowed to use bolt rigs here, and I do have a float stop up the line as well, as per usual, to stop it running towards the tip, and like I say, just sort of make life easy when I'm rebaiting. In terms of the rod, gone for a 9-foot Garbolino picker rod. Anything nice and soft, 1 ounce tip in the end, because we're fishing up to a slope. Where the island is, I've had a good lead around and it does slope up to, it's about sort of sloping up from 3 foot to about sort of 2.5, 2 foot, something like that. So when you're fishing on the slope with a method feeder, it's important that you do pick a heavier feeder and a lighter tip, I find. You want the feeder to bed in and stay on the shelf, and you want a nice light tip so you're getting line bites and stuff like that, so the fish don't dislodge the feeder. So that's an important consideration and one that I've had to go for today. If I was fishing in open water, I'd fish a lighter feeder, say 15 gram, and tightened right up if it was quite shallow. So stuff like that's important to think about. But as I say, that's a standard method feeder. Got a 3012 size Daiwa TDM as usual, loaded with 020 Daiwa TDR. Nice and durable, but nice and thin. Again, we're not fishing for massive fish there. I think F1s will be the main target. 15 gram small size Drennan feeder, quick change bead, 015 hook length, down to a size 18 QM1 and a bait band. You'll see on this I've got the bait band really nice and tight to the hook, and I like to use a small lighter hook where possible, especially when F1s are concerned. If I was fishing for proper carp today, and only proper carp, I'd use a size 14, maybe scale down to a 16 QM1 on 017 with a slightly longer hair. But where there's F1s and skimmers and trying to catch a lot of sort of variety of fish, have that hair as short as you possibly can. So that's a useful little tip. The second rod that I've set up is something, like I said, to think about a bit more in detail. Pop this one to one side. It's duplicate kit, so exactly the same reels, rods, main lines and everything. But I've set this up with a 24 gram Guru hybrid feeder. The key thing is with this is I won't be using ground bait in this feeder, I'll be using pellets exclusively. With the method I can switch between ground baits. I've got a mixture of ground bait and pellet, or just pellets, whereas this, say if I'm getting played by a lot of small fish, skimmers, roach, stuff like that, I might look to cut out the ground bait and just fish pellet. The other thing is with this, compared to a normal method where the bait can sort of fall off the side, because it's got a rim on it, it keeps the bait in a much tighter area. So say you're missing a lot of bites, getting loads of silly indications from small fish, a lot of liners dislodging your feeder, stuff like that. Switching to something like this, and in more extreme circumstances, a pellet feeder, means that the fish can only really get at it one way, and you're more likely to put more, basically hook more fish. Cuts down a lot of the foul hookers, missed bites, and as I say, because you're keeping it a nice tight parcel, and with just using pellets it's a bit more selective than using ground bait. So like I say, those are the couple of things that I've considered today. Hook length and rig's exactly the same on that, as I've said. And that brings me on to the bait choice. As I've alluded to there, because of the time of year, I'm looking to sort of catch a mixed bag. I want to be able to chop and change, give myself options. So in terms of bait, I've gone for green swim stim ground bait. I've got the rest of it mixed up down there, so I've just got a little bit out in case I decide to use ground bait neat. I don't think I will, but it's always worth having that option. 3mm green swim stim pellets. Rather than using sort of 2mm screttings, which I've used before here, I found they attract a lot of small fish here. So So a slightly larger pellet, a 3mm, also lends itself much more to using the hybrid feeder as well. So something to consider, a slightly larger pellet. Getting more extreme circumstances, a 4mm might be a 4mm feed pellet might be useful. Fishing a pellet feeder, as I say. And then what I do is have a little tub next to me where I just have a 50-50 mix, and I can tweak this throughout the day. Quite often it's the mix that I always end up using anyways, a 50-50 split. But as I say, I want to have myself options to chop and change if I'm getting plagued by small fish. So using 2 different rigs and getting a variety of bait for the feeder is the way to go for that. Hook bait wise, couldn't be simpler. 4mm hard pellets or 6s, and I've got a variety of 6s as well, just in case I want a standout bait, say a red pellet, something to stand out over that green base mix. So that's pretty much it, as I say, for the method feeder. So I've got them clipped up to the island now, so we'll turn around on the box. It's just gone 10 o'clock, so I think it's about time to start the session, so we'll crack on and see what we can catch on the first couple of chucks of the day. Right, so I'm going to go for the first cast of the session. For anyone that's not familiar with method feeder fishing, as I say, it's one of the most widely covered things in commercial fishing, but a couple of things to remember when you're loading a feeder. First of all, making sure that your ground bait has had plenty of time to settle and it's mixed on the drier side so it doesn't stick in the mould. Likewise, have your mould cleaned out as best you can. This one's a bit old, so it's a bit grubby, but dead simple thing, and what I usually tend to do when I'm starting fishing somewhere like this is have the pellet exposed on the top. So I'll start off with a 50-50 mix, and I've got a chance to cut out the ground bait or cut out the pellets, see which way the session progresses. But it's dead simple just to load that ground bait onto the method. Nice firm squeeze, and that's why you mix it on the dry side, so it's going to explode off the feeder. And there you go. Nice little method feeder. The pellet's just beneath there. I can see sort of the lump where it is, and a nice 6mm pellet should catch a bit of everything. So get this chucked out for the first cast of the session. As I say, in terms of where I'm fishing, I've got the same far bank marker for my short pole line as the method chuck, so it's a useful little thing that if you can combine them, it saves you having to memorise a load of different swims. And where I've decided to fish off the edge of the island is where it starts to go around the corner a little bit. I don't want to fish right into the reeds because, as you can see, they come quite far off, and that's going to leave a lot of stick ups, so leaving myself a little bit of space, probably aiming a couple of foot off the edge of the reeds there. I found a nice little flat area where there's not too much rubbish on the bottom, so I should be able to get a good presentation there. So we'll give this a chuck and see what we get. Again, I'll have to get into a rhythm of this because I've not fished the method feeder in probably the best part of 2 or 3 months, so my casting might look a little bit rusty to start with, but that's gone in nicely. Hit the clip and a nice gentle plop as it's gone in. And then that tip set, straight away we're getting line bites. So it tells me then that I've got the right area of the peg. Again, leading around told me that it's about 2.5–3 foot deep, and with an area such as this, especially when there's been a bit of cold water, and I'm looking for that slightly deeper water where I can find it. And especially on a method chuck like this, it means that I'm not going to like a mud bank or anything where I'm looking for sort of 18 inches of water. I'm looking for sort of 2–2.5 foot. I think this time of year that gives me the best option of getting bites and starting to build the peg. In terms of what I'm going to do casting wise, I'm going to look to cast every 2 to 3 minutes to start off with to build the peg. Again, coming back to having a dry mix, there's one on straight away. This feels like a decent fish to start off with. Going back to what I was saying about having a dry mix, I wanted to come off the feeder nice and quick. That also results, just kind of exemplified there, in much faster bites. That's a fantastic start within about a minute of that feeder going in. We're into the first fish. Nice violent bite as well. So they're not just picking the bait up and moseying around. I'd expect this to be an F1 or maybe a carp actually. Did fight well to start with. See, with the deep water right under our feet, it's gone down there, so it could be a barbel. Not entirely sure yet. Got to be careful with the size 18 hook. But the other good thing with the QM one's nice heavy gauge as well, so although they're a small hook, you do tend to get a very good hook hold with them. Sod's Law says as I'm saying that this will come off, but see what we've got here. And it's a nice little barbel to start off the session. What I'm going to do with the keep nets is keep fish of sort of a pound or less in one net and a pound and over in the other. But that's a cracking little start and a lovely little fish. Nailed right in the bottom lip. So just keep the disgorge at hand. As I say, we're off the mark already. Cracking little fish to start the session. Amazing how hard they fight for their size, these as well. So we'll keep the smaller fish in the left net, the larger fish in the right hand side, I think. Again, it tells me as well that the mix is working perfectly. Saw how quick that bite came about, and as I say, that's when the fish are able to get at the bait nice quick. What you'll find if your mix is too damp or too stodgy is that you'll see lots of line bites, get lots of funny indications. The feeder will get dislodged, but you won't hook a lot of fish. That's telling you that they're struggling to get to the hook bait, whereas that, you saw within about a minute that one was on. So repeat the process, like I say, hopefully start to build a decent weight at this rate. So again, squeezing the feeder nice and hard. Like I said, with the dry mix, they explode off the feeder nice and quick. You can see the ground bait just holds that pellet nicely on top. What you can do, and as I say, if it turns out the stamper fish is dropping, I might look to double skin the feeder with either pellets or ground bait, put a bit more bait down and conceal that hook bait for a bit longer. But like I'm saying, I'm looking for a quick start, and that's fantastic. As I say, if the session progresses and we start sort of getting silly indications and stuff like that, with the ground bait on the feeder, then I'll look to either cut out the ground bait, as I say, or I'll switch to the hybrid feeder and we'll give that a go as well. So we'll carry on with this for the time being. Again, hit the clip nice and gently, let the feeder sink, and then just set the rod down. The other thing that's important to do as well is make sure that you've got the rod nice and low to the water as best you can, especially if it's windy. Like I say, that gives you the truest reading of indications. The way I like to do it, especially where possible on pegs like this, is have my rod across the keep nets. It saves me having loads of stuff around me with different landing net, different rod rests and stuff like that. If you can have it on your keep nets, it's dead easy just to put the rod down. It's nice and secure against the little side tray there and the leg of the seat box. And as I say, it's just out the way, dead simple. What it also means, say you're loose feeding other lines, it's not getting in your way, you're not knocking the rod. It's there just to fish away. So you're getting indications all the time. So one thing that I will say is I won't start feeding that second line till about an hour in after the method feeder. Normally, say if it was match conditions, I'd be loose feeding it from the start and looking for indications, but due to the structure of what we're doing today, I don't really have that option. I've got to fish it for about 2 hours, this method, so I don't want to feed it too early and sort of go through too much bait. What I'm going to do is try and develop it towards the back end of the 2 hour stint on the method. So one thing that I'll also keep an eye out for while I'm fishing the method feeder like this is sort of areas of bubbles, stuff like that, that try and give me an indication of what fish are in the peg where I'm chucking the method. Say for example, I see a lot of small fish scattering above the feed. It can also give you an indication that a lot of the feed's coming off on the cast, so that's one thing to take note of. Say if your ground bait mix is too dry or say conversely too wet, creating a cloud and lots of particles are coming off on the way down, especially in deeper water. You'll often see a lot of roach and things swirling on the top for those loose particles, and that tells you that there's something wrong with your mix. So as I say, little things like this that you can learn when you're method feeder fishing. It's just worth keeping an eye out for. I say one thing where I'm casting as well, I've decided not to go into sort of like the middle of the channel to start off with. I've decided to go to the island firstly because it obviously holds more fish, and secondly because there's a firmer bottom there. If I go into sort of the middle of the islands where there's quite a few sort of smallish fish topping, I think I'll probably catch a smaller stamper fish, and equally I think that I'll struggle with fizzing in the peg as well. So another little thing to think of, and as I say, that blends into using a much heavier feeder as well, to make sure it sits nice and firm on the bottom on that slope. Not as many indications on this cast, so I'll give it another sort of 30 seconds or so, bring the feeder back in and cast out again, trying to build a little area of feed. And that's where a method feed is much more efficient than say a hybrid feeder or a pellet feeder. You create a nicer area of feed, the water obviously can attack the feed a lot quicker and break it down, so you end up with a nice little area of feed. So it's the equivalent sort of say if you're cad potting in on a pole every time you go out, something like that, rather than just putting in a small bit of feed or cutting out the feed completely. A little bit of a pull there. So it's something to think about if you're looking to kickstart a peg. Say for example, there's a lot of people chucking method feeders around you, or pellet feeders. If you start fishing a method, you can get a lot more bait down a lot quicker, cast more repeatedly, and the fish can get to your bait a little bit quicker. Once the fish are in the peg, that's when something like a hybrid feeder or a pellet feeder is the way to go. And that's another fish on now. It's fighting a bit differently this one. It could be an F1. It's jagging its head a lot. That's a fantastic start. Just have to switch the angle on the fish so it doesn't go around the island. You can see as well with a nice heavy feeder there, the tip went round then dropped back, so the fish has hooked itself nicely. Again, I found in the past using lighter feeders, especially when F1s are concerned, they can pick the bait up, you'll look like you've got a proper bite and there's nothing there because they haven't actually hooked themselves. And it is an F1. So already we're probably towards £2 or so in the bag, which is good. Lovely little markings on him. Almost a bit of ghosty in him, to be fair. Absolutely mint condition, so we'll just nick the hook out of him. That's a really chunky little fish. Definitely over £1. See if he'll behave for camera. As you can see, cracking little fish. So we'll get him popped in the net. I say that pellet's again good to go for another fish. I'm not too fussed about the actual hook bait choice in most cases when it comes to fishing for F1s and barbel and carp and stuff like that on a method feeder. I think unless if you get the location of the feeder right and the bait choice in terms of feed bait right, the hook bait's almost irrelevant because they should be really going after the pellets and the particles in the feed. So as I say, basically for the first couple of hours it's going to be a case of repeating this process, trying to keep the casting as accurate as I can, and as I say, just trying to build the peg and keep the stamper fish nice and high. So again, one last little squeeze of the feeder before I chuck it out there. That's gone in a little bit closer to the reeds than I'd like, but as I say, because I've led it around there, I can be nice and confident that it's still presented properly. So my casting's a little bit rusty, so hopefully as the 2 hours go on I should be able to get a bit more accurate, a bit more regular, make sure I'm dropping that feeder in the right place. Nice big line bite there. And that's one thing, you can see the size of that line bite that I just had, and the tip's come back to the exact same point as it was, and that's down to using a heavy feeder. So if the feeder was light, then that tip would have come back or gone right round. The fish would have moved the feeder and effectively ruined the presentation. But a nice heavy feeder like that, coupled with the soft quiver tip, means that the tip can go right round, come back and let you distinguish those line bites easily without you having to rebait, recast, and like I say, moving the feeder ultimately. Right, and there's another fish on the method now. This will be the third one. It's taking a little bit longer for that bite. What I'm doing is I'm timing the cast as well now to about sort of 3 or 4 minutes it's taking for a bite. I thought I'd leave it a couple of minutes to start with, but it does seem that the fish are actually turning up after sort of 3 or 4 minutes, so it's another nice little F1. So I'm just leaving it that little bit longer. I say it's rewarded a nice little fully scaled ghost carp by the looks of it. There's lovely markings on that one. Rod absolutely shot off the rest. You can see lovely scale markings on him. Just slip the hook out and get him popped in the net. Again, fantastic hook hold right in the bottom lip. It's never coming off that one. We'll crack on and try and get a few more now. Right, so interesting, after those first few fish, what's happened is I've started getting a lot of silly indications I was sort of alluded to earlier. What I'm going to try now is on the next couple of casts is just try a pellet, purely pellets around the feeder. A couple of things that I'll do. Firstly, it stops the little cloud that you can get from ground bait occasionally, but also because of the air gaps around the pellets rather than the mix with ground bait, it'll break down a lot faster, again allowing the fish to get to the feeder quicker and hopefully your hook bait. Let's say again, if I start missing more bites with this, then I'm looking to go onto the hybrid feeder. I'm already sort of half an hour into the session toying with the idea of doing that, purely because, as I say, we're getting lots of indications now. I've missed a couple of bites where the fish have pretty much picked up the feeder and just dropped it, so usually those are often gudgeon and skimmers that are doing that. So like I say, just chopping and changing, and hopefully we'll start to put a few more of those fish on the bank. Right, and straight away there's a better fish. That one's come within sort of a minute and a half, 2 minutes of that cast after switching to pellets, and a proper steady indication. Feels like a barbel, this. And a nice clean bite there, the fish was clearly on. And like I say, little changes like that by the end of the day can really sort of add up to a lot of weight more in your keep net. As I say, it's all about turning those indications into fish in the net. And it is another little barbel, this. Or is it actually? Might be a lean little F1. See a nice bend in these soft rods as well. No, it's not a barbel. Lovely colours on this fish. Looks like a little common, that actually. Good little weight builder that. That one's over £1, so that's going in the right hand side net. Again, nailed right in the bottom lip. Lovely little fish. Plenty of energy in him, so we'll get him slipped back. As I say, quite often the switch to sort of pellets rather than ground bait around the feeder can result in a better stamp of fish, like catching proper carp. So, as I say, little things like that are things that sort of you need to sort of take away from this this video. I think giving yourself those options, especially this time of year, and hopefully if we keep on with the pellets, maybe switch to the hybrid feeder, we might well start to put a few more of those proper carp in the net and really build the weight. Again, just picking a nice long barrel shaped coarse pellet. It's one that's definitely not going to come off the band. As I say, just putting that right on top of just neat pellets. So as you can see there, giving it one final squeeze. The hook bait pellets right on top, plenty of air gaps, especially with slightly bigger 3mm pellets, so the pellets will break down quicker off the method feeder. As I say, sometimes if you're trying for a quicker bite, little things like that can really help. Casting's a little bit better that time. Again, and then just gradually tighten up to the feeder, waiting for the two V's on the water to meet, and then the line sunk. Again, with method feeders, there's no point rushing sinking the line, because all you're going to do then is move the feeder. So a lot of people sort of chop in the rod to sink the line. As long as you've got a nice heavy feeder on and a fairly thin made line, but still nice and robust, you should have no problem sinking the line, even when it's flat calm like it is today. So obviously if the fish does pick up the feeder, it's going to hook itself anyway, so you'll see the line pretty much tighten up if the fish does hook itself while you're trying to sink the line. So as I say, using nice heavy feeders like that does help you do that as well. See, line bites straight away. Again, at the moment, rather than say when I'm using sort of like traditional feeders, like I say, I like to look at my watch really to keep track of time. Sometimes with this, you sort of know when a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes has passed by, and that's when it's time to bring the feeder in. So there's fish on the feeder already. And hopefully by using those pellets, and as I say, having the hook bait situated on top, should result in quicker bites. Again, if these sort of silly indications continue and I'm not putting quite as many fish on the bank as I think I could do, so that's when we'll switch to the hybrid feeder. But for the time being, I want to still try and get a better bait down. We're only sort of 45 minutes into the first 2 hours. There's still plenty of time left on the method, so I want to try and get some bait down and try and track some better fish. Like I said earlier as well, some point in the sort of the second hour of this first stint, I'll look to start loose feeding that shallow line at sort of three, 4 sections out. And as I say, just preparing that for when we go into the second segment of this match scenario. if I'm honest, I'll have to say it has been a fairly slow start to the session, a lot slower than I thought it'd be, so we're going to have a lot of catching up to do. Another line bite there, especially towards the back end of the session, so hopefully my choice in fishing sort of a 6mm hard pellet line, nice and short for better fish, hopefully that should sort of make up for a slow start. And there's another fish on now. Much steadier pull round. This could be a skimmer or something, not entirely sure yet. Either that or it's a small F1. But straight away, like I said, switching to those pellets round the feeder after missing sort of 2 or 3 daft indications. Within 5 minutes I've had 2 clean bites and it is a skimmer. Again, not a big fish, another sort of 10-12 ounces, and they do certainly add up, so well worth catching. Again, nailed right in the bottom lip. So already we've had a fair selection of species on the method feeder. But that change to pellets has definitely really improved the catch rate already. And again, if this wasn't a real match, those kind of decisions and sort of things that you can identify during the session really can make a massive difference towards the end of the day. So judging by how it's fishing at the moment, the 50 pound might be a bit of a challenge today, but we'll just have to see how it goes. But at least the fish are definitely feeding on pellets, so again, that transfers into what we're going to do later on. Fishing close in on pellet. At least they're still feeding on them even though the water temperatures are down. Right, and there's another fish now on. Not sure what it is yet, could be another barbel, judging by the bite. But it's definitely made a world of difference as changing to the 3mm pellets round the feeder. The bites are much cleaner and they're much quicker after the feeder's gone in. As I say, that's with the feeder breaking down much faster. Actually looks like a small F1 or something, this. Tiny little fish by comparison to what we've had. Fought very well though. I'll say that's another few ounces in the net, not quite a pound that one. Little F1. But definitely making that change to pellets, as I say, has made a world of difference. Fish are coming to the feeder much quicker, much cleaner bites as well, so I think that's what we'll stick with, is the 3mm pellets round the feeder rather than the mixture of ground bait and pellets. So I think what it's time to do now that the first hour's nearly up, got another hour to crack on, so I think what we'll do is really try and build the weight in the net and then keep you updated if we start catching a few better fish, and really if we make any other changes as the session goes on. So I'll get this loaded up and chucked back out there, and like I say, hopefully we'll have a few more fish and get towards that 50 pound target. Right, and there's another fish now on the method. Again, what I've done there, I just pretty much delayed putting the hybrid feeder on for just 1 or 2 casts, just to put a little bit more bait down there. And I think that's what I'll switch to on the next cast. As you could see there, I was loose feeding a few casters, a few 4mm pellets just to prime that second line. As I say, we've got probably another 45 minutes on the setting off a little bit is this one. Another 45 minutes fishing the method feeder before we've got to switch methods and, as I say, go shallow on the pole at sort of 6-7 metres, something like that. And it's noticeable as well, the stamp fish isn't particularly good on the method feeder anymore for whatever reason. As I say, no harm in switching then onto that hybrid feeder. Again, that one nails right in the bottom lips, perfect hook hold, but a small sort of linear mirror carp, that lovely, or F1 I think it could be, not entirely sure when they're that size. We'll get him popped in the net. And like I say, we'll switch to that hybrid feeder now and just see if that produces anything different. Again, the whole idea behind the hybrid feeder, as I say, is to try and convert more sort of indications into hooked fish. And as the sessions wore on the method feeder, it's one thing that I've noticed, we're getting lots of indications from liners and not quite as many proper pulls as we were getting when we started the session. So in terms of the hybrid feeder, I'm going to stick to exactly the same baits. 6mm pellet on the hair. Just using a standard coarse pellet. Give myself a little bit of extra line. And I'll quickly show you how to load the hybrid feeder. One of the things I do like about the hybrid feeder, apart from the fact that it holds the bait a lot neater, and you can get away with fishing in slightly deeper water with it, is just how quick it is to load. So when you're speed fishing and you're trying to catch a lot of smaller fish at speed, you don't need a mould. It's dead simple. It's literally a case, all I do is fill the pan in my hand, press the 3mm pellets in, not too tight, lay the hook bait on top like so. See, just try and do it to camera, it's a bit harder, like so, and then a few more pellets on top just to encase it in and give that a really nice firm press. Say, because of the slots around the feeder and the holes in the base as well, the water can attack it from all angles, drive the pellets out, and as I say, leave your hook bait bang in the middle. So it also allows you to fish a little bit less bait than a method feeder, so again, weaning the fish onto the hook a little bit more as well. See, there's fish topping out there already. You can see I've clipped this up at exactly the same distance as the other rod. And again, one thing that's important when you're using duplicate kit is to do that. Again, on commercials like this where you're not having to fish too far out, one thing that I do use is measuring sticks. I find it much easier just to sort of walk the bait out, and especially when you've got sort of a nice grass verge behind you, to do that saves a lot of time and prep, faffing around, counting reel turns and things like that, and you can be inch perfect in terms of accuracy. So say, a useful little tip to consider is that. And again, like I say, because I've had the past couple of chucks on the method feeder, sort of 5 or 6 casts using just micro pellets, there should be a nice little bed of micros out there. So a smaller feeder like this, much more accurate, much more neat and tidy, hopefully should put a few more fish on the hook. And again, because there's a lot less bait in it, I'll look to be casting this quite regularly as well. Again, sort of a couple of minutes a cast, something like that. There's a better fish on now. Just getting concerned then that I wasn't going to get a bite, and the rod's just absolutely ripped off the rest. Must be a barbel, this has gone absolutely ballistic. Again, and one thing that I have been doing as well, it's worth noting, is I've been feeding my shallow lines, or my shallow line I should say. And I've already seen a few swirls, so we've only got half an hour left on the method feeder. As I say, it's crucial that you do keep priming those other swims. Seen some quality fish swirling and even seen 1 or 2 carp cruising round, so it might well be that sort of second stint really does make a difference, and that's a better F1 this time round. Much better fish. Again, that one's over £1 that time, so that little switch might have made all the difference. Actually, it's a little ghost carp. Lovely markings on him. That's a stunning little fish, as you can see there. Get him unhooked, get him popped in the net. But because the sport hasn't been quite as prolific as we'd have liked to start off with the method feeder, I'm going to have to be as quick as I can getting the feeder chucked back out there. As I say, really trying to make the most of the last half hour on this method. But that's a really good response after switching to the hybrid feeder. So a really positive bite and a better stand fish. So get this rebaited and chucked back out there, again with a 6mm pellet on the hair, I think. As I say, the way that I load the feeder, get a palmful of 3mm pellets, push the feeder as hard into my hand as I can do, and then just try and lodge the pellet on the top and compress it once more before casting it out. It's like so, you might lose a couple of pellets off the top, and then squeeze it down as hard as possible. As you see, that's perfect to get chucked back out there. So a really nice little neat parcel of bait, and fantastic when you're struggling with a lot of daft indications on a standard method feeder. And that's ready for another bite. So again, as soon as that feeder's gone out of the way, and I've got the feeder rod out of the way I should say, just means it frees my hands up, and like I say about removing rod rests and all the sort of paraphernalia that goes with it, using your keep nets, plenty of room then to start loose feeding the casters on that shallow line. Again, one thing that I have done as well is offset it slightly away from the line running towards the method feeder or the hybrid feeder, just to stop myself getting lots of silly indications from the shallow line. Again, some days when you're not sure whether the fish are going to come shallow, it's useful to actually loose feed over a line such as this to give you an idea of when the fish are there, but because I've seen fish swirling, I know the fish should come up in this deeper water. I'm not too fussed about doing that, so like I say, I've just set it off to the side. There's one on. That's a better fish. He's at the clip. Come back here. Right, I've just hooked a much better fish now suddenly on the hybrid feeder, and he's taken me immediately to the clip and only just managed to bring him back round. This could be a bigger carp or a barbel or something. There's definitely more weight to the fish this time round. Feels like a proper carp. It's nodding its head. Again, got to be careful on the little size 18. I've already lost a couple of fish. Probably F1s, I think, where they're just not hooking themselves properly, and that can often be a problem here. This definitely feels like the biggest fish we've hooked so far on the method line. That's with sort of 15 minutes to go. With it being a much steadier method than we'd have thought it would be. Definitely need this one in the bag. And this is where you're relying on nice soft rods and reels with really good quality drag systems on them. This is definitely a couple of pound, this. That's a much better carp, that one. Just tried to get round to the reed bed on my right hand side. And one thing that I have done today that I'll mention later on as well is that I've pegged my keep nets back behind me, so hopefully you can't quite get underneath them. Try and get his head up now. That's a much better fish. There we go, lovely common carp, immaculate condition. So he had me worried a couple of times. That one took me to the clip as soon as he picked up the feeder. This should help us well on our way to that target. So I'm not 100% sure whether I want to hold him up to camera, but we'll have a quick go and just see if he'll comply with us. Just drop that out of the way. And look at that for a fish. Hopefully we'll catch a few of those later on in part 3 on a top kit just out in front of us, but that's a clonking fish to catch on the feeder. As I say, will really help us on our way towards that target weight. So we'll quickly rush to get the feeder back out. We've got about 12 minutes left on the method. Make sure we keep that shallow line topped up. And as I say, can look forward to that in part 2 of the match scenario. Loads of fish swirling there as well now. Right, so we've only got a couple of minutes left of the first 2-hour stint in this match scenario series. In terms of like summarising it, it's been a good little first start. Not really had as much as we'd have hoped, but we've had a bonus carp, a few F1s, a couple of barbel, a few little carp as well, and a skimmer. So we've been ticking over, putting a couple of pound in the net, and like I say, setting ourselves up towards the 50-pound target. So I'll get this chucked out. Not the best cast in the world, that one, but it's a bit hard when you're talking to camera. But like I was saying, in terms of what we've done, chopped and changed around with the method feeder and the hybrid feeder, sort of tweaked a few things. The switch to pellets has been a massive game changer in terms of putting more fish on the bank and hooking more fish and cutting out all the daft indications. And as I say, those little changes are what you can take away from this first stint. In terms of what I've been doing as well for the last 45 minutes, an hour, I've been loose feeding that shallow line, which we'll go on to in part 2. See lots of fish swirling, plenty of activity, so it's looking like we should have a good 2 hours on that stint. And as I say, we've started nicely, probably got, I reckon, between anywhere from 10 to 15 pound in the net. So we still have our work cut out for us, and especially we'll be relying a lot on that last hour and those better fish coming in short. But as I say, good little start. We'll just see if we can get one more fish to end on, being that we've got a couple more minutes to go before this first 2-hour stint's ending. So there's still a few fish down there, just making sure I keep that loose feed going in for the shallow line. As I say, hopefully the few things that we've covered in this little sort of, not quite an introduction, but a bit more in depth as to how I'd go about tweaking a few things on the method feeder in a match, hopefully that can relate to your method feeder fishing, sort of giving yourself other options in terms of bait choices and little setups and tips and tricks like that, sort of where you present the hook bait and various other things. As I say, today's been a perfect example of why it's important to have those in your armoury, especially being that we started off getting plenty of indications, lots of small F1s in the peg. But then, as I say, the indications became a bit daft. Too many fish there, switched to the hybrid feeder and instantly had a couple. As I say, it's also produced that bonus carp as well. So, like I say, plenty of little tips and tricks to take away from it. Got probably another minute left, so we'll just see if it goes round. If it doesn't, like I say, we'll crack on and get onto that shallow line. As I say, conclude it at part 1 for the method feeder and then start part 2, as I say, on the shallow rigs. Right, and there's another fish on the hybrid feeder, just with probably about 30 seconds to go before we wrap up this 2-hour segment. Doesn't feel like a big fish, but as I say, I think what we'll do is we'll call this the last one for the method feeder. And as I say, part 1. Looks like a little F1 this. And then we'll crack on with the shallow fishing. There he is in the net, another lovely little F1. As I say, fantastic weight builders, that one nudging a pound or so. Again, nailed right in the bottom lip, never coming off that one. So we'll get him slipped in the net. So he's about to go mental and jump out my hand, but we'll get him popped in the net. Conclude this section. As I say, crack on with part 2. So get this popped out of the way. Chuck some casters in and, like I say, just give you a quick roundup of what we're doing. So, as I say, that's the end of the method feeder section. 2 hours, hopefully some of the stuff we've run through here will help you in the method feeder fishing that you do on a commercial. Say a fantastic little start to the match scenario. So as I say, we'll wrap up part 1 at that, crack on with part 2, and as I say, keep your eyes peeled for that, they'll be coming out soon. So from Last Cast, cheers for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.